And good afternoon. Welcome to the big show. The big show, we do it every day, or at least we try and do it every day, as much as we can possibly do it every day of the week when it comes to talking about things that are all related to Pittsburgh sports. I'm Paul Zeise, of course. We try and do it 5 days a week, four days a week, sometimes 5 days a week. The next few weeks, probably 2 days a week, just from the standpoint of it's becoming really difficult to do 4 of these a week just because it's the summer. And of course, the summer is, always a time when it's very, very slow. As I said before, I think that one of the things that's probably going to happen tonight is that we are going to be saying goodbye to the NBA season. From the standpoint of the NBA, I think that Oklahoma City is going to win and close it out tonight. So if that's the case, and really, if that's the case, that means we are now going to be in a place where, okay, what are we going to talk about? Because there's just not a whole lot going on in sports. And I think that's the most important thing this next month for all of us, basically, in this business is just try to survive. And there are people that, talk about, the guys on the radio, why are they always saying the same things over and over and over again? Well, for the most part, that's what happens at this time of year, but unfortunately, one of the biggest things is you've got a situation of where, the Pirates stink. And so people don't really want to talk about the Pirates. And then when it comes to some other situations, the Penguins, I guess, are giving something to talk about just from the standpoint of, they've got a new coach and we're going to talk about, the new staff that they brought in and all that stuff as it starts to ramp up. But I don't really think that, they've given us a lot to talk about either. It's just been a very quiet kind of off season other than the coaching search. And there's a lot of different ways to go about it. But the reality is, to me, I just feel like when we basically start to look at some things and try and talk about some things, it can be really difficult. It can slow down quickly. And I think one of the things we try and do is when it slows down, we try and, make sure that we basically are sort of on the same page with that. And so that being said, Jeremy Fowler had a report, and this is kind of interesting stuff, that basically said that the Steelers traded George Pickens in large part because they brought in Aaron Rodgers. His source says that, I guess, or he says, staying with Pittsburgh-related matters, the Steelers moved on from Pickens for a few reasons. His maturity issues were well known within Pittsburgh's locker room, front office. So the Steelers made the evaluation that Pickens and Rodgers probably would not hit it off. Now, Gerry Dulac has basically, said this is not accurate at all, and that one move had nothing to do with the other. And I'm going to tell you this much right now, as someone that's been in this business for a long, long time, I actually agree with Gerry Dulac here. I don't even know anything. I don't know I don't have sources and all the other stuff, but I've been around this business a long, long time. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think there's any way in hell that Aaron Rodgers that the Steelers decided that they couldn't have these two personalities in the locker room at the same time. I think that's nonsense. I think that's absolute, utter nonsense. And the bottom line is, you mean to tell me when the Steelers had Ben and Antonio Brown, they didn't have that dynamic? Is that what you're trying to, or is that the argument you're trying to make if you're a Jeremy Fowler? And I love Jeremy Fowler. He's a great reporter. So this is not me ripping him. I'm just saying the Steelers have, and every NFL team has, because the nature of professional athletes is such that you're going to have some guys that are divas. So every locker room has, multiple guys that are divas. The idea that somehow, well, the Steelers were shying away from this, I don't buy that for 1 second. Again, a lot of what happens, at this time of year, a lot of what happens is really, really simple. And that is that you look for stuff to talk about. You know what I mean? You look for stuff to talk about. And it just doesn't make sense. I always say when you hear these reports from these guys, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. It's got to tell a story. And I think that's the story that needs to be told. It's just one of those things. And I think that, when it comes to this thing, I look at the story and say the story doesn't make sense. It just doesn't. The story does not make sense. And it's just, I don't know. I just feel like it's a situation where I read the report and I say basically, you know what? It doesn't add up. I don't have sources and all that stuff, but there's times when I read some of the stuff these guys write and I just or say, in this case, I guess he was on a broadcast and said it, and I say to myself, that doesn't even make sense. Doesn't even make sense. So, like, for me at least, when I see this stuff, I'm just kind of like shaking my head, like, this is really kind of a silly take in so many ways, because it just is one of these stories that, if you look at it from afar, it really doesn't add up at all. It doesn't. The Steelers don't care about having two big personalities in the locker room at once. That's not why. That has nothing to do with why they traded George Pickens. They traded George Pickens for two reasons. One, because they kind of felt like he wasn't going to come into his own a little bit and mature the way they wanted him to. And secondly, because that meant they were going to either have to let him go, he's going to have to walk at the end of the year, and they get nothing for him, essentially, or they're going to have to pay big money. The writing was on the wall that he was going to be gone pretty much when DK Metcalf came and signed his $30 million deal, $30 million a year deal. There's no chance they were going to sign two receivers for that kind of money. They just weren't. And there's no chance that George Pickens was going to, accept that kind of money. I mean, less than that kind of money. He was going to be, just like all these other guys saying, well, hey, here's the bottom line. I've been the guy here for 3 or 4 years, and you just gave this guy $30 million. You better give me $30 million, because that's how all these guys think. And I think that the Steelers understood, at the very least, they'd be paying them 25, 26, 27 million, maybe even the 30. They're not going to pay $60 million for two receivers. They're just not. And I think that's the key when it comes to it. It was just a situation where it's coincidental that Aaron Rodgers coming and George Pickens getting traded. I don't believe, like I said, I don't believe for 1 second that either move, and Gerry Dulac has said this, I don't believe either move has anything to do with the other one. If anything, Aaron Rodgers has been a guy, receivers are divas. I'm assuming that he would probably be somebody that would want to play with receivers, right? Great receivers, because they're divas, but he's used to it. He'd rather have great players than not. And that's the thing it comes down to me, when you think about it. Aaron Rodgers has been in locker rooms with all kinds of receivers, and guys who are flamboyant or whatever, narcissistic or whatever. And here's the other. I'm going to tell you one other thing that bothers me. I think I keep hearing people talk about Aaron Rodgers as sort of like he's some sort of cancer or bad teammate or whatever. And I don't think there's any evidence at all of that. Like, I don't know where that comes from, but I don't know that there's really any evidence that he's a bad guy. I just don't think there's any evidence of it. And so to me, I just feel like, where does that come from? And so it's something that people just say, it's one of those things where people just say these things and then they say it over and over and over and over again. And they keep saying it and they say it and they say it again and they say it again. And it becomes like gospel. And it's like, well, where did it come from? And that's just one of those things where I just think when people say, oh, he's a bad teammate or whatever, okay, well, what's the evidence? And what is the evidence? Like, where is the evidence that that's the case? Because I don't think it is the case. And so, to me, it's one of those things where I just think people say these things, but they don't necessarily really mean them. So I don't know. It just is weird to me. It really is. I mean, it's a very strange situation to me. And he seems to me to be a good teammate. He seems to be a guy that, gets along with people. It's just one of those things where he's labeled a diva. He's been labeled as a narcissist. He's been labeled this, but I don't think there's much evidence that he's a bad teammate. I don't think there's much evidence that he's a cancer in the locker room. People just say that stuff and it's grown. And there are certain people that just don't like him for a number of reasons, and we all know why. There's certain political reasons and there's certain reasons that, I get it. But at the end of the day, there's no evidence that he's really a bad teammate or been a bad teammate. I mean, that's just how it is. And I think that when it comes down to it, I mean, the reality is, I don't think for 1 second that Aaron Rodgers had anything to do at all with George Pickens being traded to the Cowboys. I just don't. I mean, that's just reality. So, we've got another day of TJ Watt watch. And it's interesting. It seems like the two sides are pretty far apart. I mean, that's the one thing I sort of can read between the lines. I don't think this is going to be something that is going to be resolved by the start of training camp. I thought before it would, but it just, it's just one of those things where I think he's going to be somebody who probably is going to hold out. He might actually be somebody that misses some of training camp because it doesn't sound like they're close. And if they're not close, it's going to be hard to make a deal quickly. Now, it always amazes me once we get into once we get into the runway of things. Yeah, the deals happen quickly. But to me, I just feel like at the end of the day, it's going to be a while. I don't think either side right now is overly motivated to move to the other side. And so it's just going to be interesting to see how that whole thing plays out. One interesting storyline that I think has been probably overlooked or underrated or whatever, I mean, hasn't been talked about nearly enough, is Broderick Jones. Now, if you look at Broderick Jones, right, one of the things about him that I think is really important is that he seems to be in the best shape of his life. Now, we hear this quite often, don't we? In the offseason, guys come back and hey, I'm in the best shape of my life. But it really sounds like he is. He is basically now a guy who's lost a bunch of weight. He's a guy who's, because he's lost some weight, he's in better shape. Because he lost some weight and he's in better shape, he probably is going to move a little bit better. And I think that's the thing about it. When you think about it, he's going to be in a better place. It's going to be in a better place when he now is in better shape, lost his weight, can move a lot better, and also has moved to the left side where he's more comfortable. And that's kind of one of those things where it's going to be really telling early on to see, if all of these things actually matter. I mean, I used to cover football for a living as a beat writer. And I always used to laugh because every single year it would be the same thing where, guys come in, oh, I'm in the best shape of my life. I lost weight. I thought this, blah, 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 yada, yada. Okay. Then the games start and they still can't play. Right? That's just, how it is. And it happens more than you think. And I think, one of the things is, they just have to basically go out and prove it. But it's one of those things where now, if you think about it, I mean, he can go out and prove it. And I think he's got a pretty good chance to be pretty good. Because let's face it, they drafted him in the first round. He's a guy that everybody universally had a first-round grade on as a left tackle. And, maybe it's taken him a little bit of time, but he's been in the different position. Then he had some injury issues and whatnot. He was thrust in before he was really, really ready. I don't know. Maybe I'm convincing myself that he's the guy or he's going to be the guy that we think he is. But I really believe if you look at him, all of the evidence, to me, in my mind, points to the fact that he's basically going to be a much better player this year than he has been. So, it's one of those storylines that we don't seem to we don't seem to talk about it, honestly, because the bottom line is we don't talk about anything but the quarterbacks around here for some reasons. And so I just think that, one of those storylines that we need to watch going into camp is going to be Broderick Jones. You look at where he fits in and what his position is and how important his position is and all that other good stuff. I mean, you honestly, in my mind, it's one of the bigger storylines that's out there. Just like, and Joe Starkey wrote a really good story about their article about this the other day, was the idea that corners, receivers are we've got to watch them, but not just receivers, corners too, and secondary guys. It's a secondary that's probably, in my mind, a little bit short right now. And so it's got to get better. It's got to get better. And some of these guys have to prove they can play. They've got to prove that they can go out and do good things. Go out and prove that they're able to, make plays in the secondary. That's what they need to do. So I'm looking at it from that standpoint, and I would tell you, I think that the Steelers are on the right track. By the way, game's always on at Archie's. Archie's, home of 80-cent wings, Monday through Thursday. Home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. You'll get down to Archie's, and when you're there, say hello to Archie for us. The Pirates lost today in the first game of this doubleheader with Detroit. Obviously, last night was rained out, so they played a doubleheader today. Everybody is losing their minds because, well, we had an opportunity maybe to have a really, really good sort of pitching matchup, right? Tariq Skubal, who's one of the best pitchers in baseball, against Paul Skeens, who obviously is one of the best pitchers in baseball, but for whatever reason, they're not pitching against each other. One is pitching the morning, the other, the first game, Skeens is pitching the second game. But let's talk about this. So whenever Donnie Kelly took over, all right, the Pirates were, let's go right here, they were coming off a loss in a series to St. Louis, so they were 12-26 when Derek Shelton was fired. 12-26 was the record when Derek Shelton was fired. So they've gotten a little bit better, okay? But here's what I'm going to tell you. 12-26, they're now 29-46, which means they are what? 17-20 since Derek Shelton was fired. Now, if you think about it, if they play that clip the rest of the way, they're going to have about 70 wins. You can say whatever you want to say, but that's what they're probably headed for. And I think when you look at it, what are they doing? They should already have fired Ben Cherington. They should already have moved on from some of these guys like Tommy Pham. They should have traded some of these guys already. They should be moving forward with the idea that, you know what? We absolutely are rebuilding now. Period. There's no question now. And I think that's the case when it comes to this whole thing. That's the case. They're rebuilding. They need to just stop trying to piece it together and, if we play 500 the rest of the way, we might do. You're not doing that. And right now, if you look at the clip that you've played since, Donnie Kelly took over, you might be looking at 70, 71 wins. That would be a step back, especially if you don't start your rebuild and we go into the offseason and they're dumpster diving for garbage players again, just to fill the roster. Their favorite term or whatever is backfilling the roster. Oh, we got to backfill the roster. That's a nice way of saying we're going to go out and find every journeyman, bad player that we can possibly find that's cheap. And we're going to put them in charge, of certain positions that we have. And we'll go from there. That's not a way to run an organization. It's just not. I think most fans probably understand now, okay, that this team is going nowhere. It's going nowhere. So since it's going nowhere, okay, you got to make sure that you do the right things here in terms of trying to build for next year. And they just don't seem to want to do that. They just don't. It's what they need to do, though. It really is. Did you happen to see the Caitlyn Clark controversy the other day and all the shrieking and screeching and whining that people are doing about it? It's got everything. We've talked about racism, the WNBA, sexism too, because, apparently Caitlyn Clark's straight and the gay women in the WNBA don't want to be nice to her and the black women at the WNBA don't want to be nice to her and all this other stuff. Could we stop? She's a young player who came into the league with a lot of fanfare. Guess what? Those are the kind of players that the veterans are going to knock around. they're going to do everything in their power to knock them down a peg. It's how the whole thing works. It's not the first one to go through it. Certainly won't be the last one to go through it. So could we stop with all this silliness? This thing is ridiculous. I've heard all of these theories about why, the WNBA is not protecting their best player or whatever she is. I just think we've lost our damn minds. It's like we create a narrative that we want and we just pound it into the ground for no reason. And I don't understand it. I wish I did, but I don't. I think it's one of those things where you basically have to convince me, hey, you have to convince me in so many ways that basically, there's racism or sexism going on. I think it's a matter of you got a hotshot player who's young, who came into the league, took it by storm, who's the highest profile player in the league, and the person that everyone kind of points to be the star. And some of the veterans have taken exception to it. I don't think it's much more than that. I know people want it to be about race. They want it to be about, the gay, straight thing. They want it to be about all these other things. I think it's just as simple as a league full of veterans who basically have said, you know what? We've had enough of this kid. She gets all of the glory. She gets all of the, publicity. So we're just going to knock her around, maybe knock her down a peg. But this thing about, they need to protect her. They don't call fouls. This isn't right. This is unfair. All this other stuff. Come on, man. Come on. What are we talking about here? Seriously. What are we talking about here? She's not the first. She's not the first. She's not the second. She's not the 100th. She's not the 1,000th rookie that has come into a professional league, taken it by storm, publicity-wise and all this other stuff, and has had to be put in her place by the veterans who take exception to it. And here's the other thing. Have you ever watched Caitlyn Clark play? I mean, she's obviously really good. She's also kind of a jerk. She's also kind of annoying. She's also somebody who's aggressive and talks trash and all that other stuff. So it ain't like she makes it easy on herself either. I had an old coach tell me, listen, you don't want to talk trash because when you're out there talking trash, you make yourself a whole lot easier to find. And, that was a football. I was playing flag football. I'll never forget this. And we had this dude who was just barking, all bark, bark, bark. He was a defensive end. He was bark, 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 bark. Just talking trash the entire game and making it. Finally, the other team had enough. They ran like a little reverse type thing, where they reversed it that way and then came back towards him and had a crackback block, where I thought they killed the guy. And it was like, that's exactly what we're talking about there. You talk too much, you make yourself easy to find. And so I'm not crying a river at all for Caitlyn Clark. I think it's silly. I think all of the people that are trying to make it into something that it isn't, they're silly too. She's not the first, like I said, she's not the last rookie. They're a young person, young player that came into the league with a lot of fanfare that veterans wanted to get, gang up and get. Happens all the time across all the leagues. So she ain't special in that regard. It's just, we got to stop with all the racism and sexism and all that stuff because it's silly.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.